Hello, welcome to All Good Points. I'm Jackie Weaver, aka Britney Spears.
And I'm just George McBride.
Have you seen that? I like to imagine that whole event was due to like the implementation of a drug consumption room or something, and Jackie's come in to defend liberal rights, but I don't think that's the case, was it?
No, I think it was about something much more boring.
Much more boring. There's actually a prequel that's come out to it now. Have you seen the prequel?
No, I didn't realise that they'd got a whole franchise funded.
Yeah, I watched the prequel the other night. I'll put it in the
What's
the
her
comments.
origin story?
It is. It's literally like an origin story of where it came from. It's incredible watching it because it's all the original characters, and you're like, oh, no, he's a baddie. He turned into a baddie. It's really good. I'll put it in the comments. Thanks for tuning in, watching the show. Please do like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get straight into it, George. It's been a pretty big week. We're sick of saying it, but it's been a pretty big week.
Big news.
All big news.
Every week.
We sort of mentioned this story a little bit last time we recorded because it was in amongst the whole GameStop thing, the GameStop Reddit fiasco. But I think we even mentioned last week that eyes may fall on cannabis stocks in amongst that kind of Wall Street bets crowd. But it looks like it has. There's been huge gains for cannabis stocks in the past week. Tilray's gone up 50%. Part of that's due to their announcement that they've done with Grow Pharma, which we'll talk about. But also, I don't know if you've seen like Sundial stocks. Sundial's gone up massively. That's doubled. And that's fairly random. Sundial's quite a random one to go.
Well, the whole like cannabis tracker is up massively. So the whole sector has seeing huge increases in share price. Yeah. It's kind of reminiscent of being back in 2018. It feels like you know a company just press releases some new agreement in a new country and suddenly a huge pop in the stock price. I think Alfredo put on Twitter a link to what's changed because there was Tilray announced a partnership to import medicines into the UK 2 or 3 years ago and saw a huge pop in their stock. And then this is 2 or 3 years later, barely anything's happened in terms of selling cannabis in the UK, and they announce another distribution deal, and boom, stock price is up 50%. Yeah. It's mad. So, yeah, there's a lot of different factors at play here, aren't there? Yeah. There's the whole GameStop Reddit army, which is fascinating, and seeing all these retail investors pour in, but a bit worrying as well. Hope people aren't, betting the house.
Don't bet your house. Don't bet your house.
No. But look after your family.
Yeah. And we're not financial advisors, blah, 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 etc., etc. Don't listen to our advice. But the Sundial one I found really interesting because I remember, I don't know if you've joined that Reddit group, George, that's got like millions of people in. It's got like 7 or 8. Wall Street Bets, it's got like 8 million people in it last time I checked. And when I was looking at it the other week in amongst the GameStop and AMC carnage, there was the odd comment that would just be like, oh, Sundial, SNDL. Get that going to cannabis stocks, and it does seem like that's the case. Yeah. Like it has gone up a lot. Like Sundial's like doubled, and that's really random. That's a really random stock.
But it's a random stock, but then it's not in the grand scheme of things, because it is the whole sector that's going up. I'm just looking. I hadn't looked at Sundial's
check out
price.
Sundial.
Obviously, it's shot up, but pretty much everyone is shot up. It's a sector wide.
Yeah, and GW Pharma's one. I mean, GW Pharma's share price that is intense. If you look at the graph for that, it's absolutely ridiculous. So I guess there's like a combination of factors, isn't there, that's resulted in sort of quite wide-reaching boost for the sector.
But then, so there's the retail investor army piling in, and we were talking about how much of an important role they played in building the whole cannabis industry in the first place. So it's kind of nice seeing them get back in. Then we've got the raft of announcements coming out of the US with seemingly every state trying to implement a recreational cannabis scheme over the next couple of years. Then we've got the fact that there has been some quite positive news over on this side of the pond as well that we'll go on to discuss. London Stock Exchange listing. And then there's a bunch of other factors at play as well. But yeah, it's quite exciting. All that good news that we've been
Yeah,
talking about every week is kind of building now into a real hype around the sector that, yeah, feels like being back in 2018.
yeah. I get that feeling. There's certainly a lot of positivity. Alistair, Alistair Moore did a tweet the other day. Not a tweet, no, it was a LinkedIn post being like, "Oh man, first Wednesdays would have been buzzing." Like this, like
Yeah,
last
so
week would have, this week and last week would have just been like it would have had that 2018 feel about it.
yeah, I think a lot of our listeners probably, there's quite a few First Wednesdays regulars out there, but for those of you that don't know, it's a professional network and regular events that Hanway Associates run, which is normally at the Institute of Directors in London, with events in Paris and Amsterdam as well, and always gets quite frothy and boozy when there's big news in the industry, but we've been without it the last year now. And God, I would love to be toasting some champagne with people who are doing well at the moment and seeing opportunities open up for cannabis businesses around the world. It is all moving in the right direction. It
Yeah.
would be nice to have a drink.
But there's been a real buzz about it. So a couple, let's hone in on a couple of the UK announcements which are relevant. One we've alluded to, that's Tilray announced an agreement with Grow Pharma to import and distribute medical cannabis products in the UK. It's good news for Grow, good news for Tilray, positive news story, and a sign of that growing UK medical cannabis market. The second big piece of UK news was MGC Pharma, first cannabis company to list on the LSE. I mean, that's massive. That's a huge. That and
Yeah.
Cannabo's going on there as well. Is it the 15th? Anyway, very, very soon. Like huge. That's what a milestone that is. You can legitimately and legally invest in a cannabis company in the UK. That is like
Yeah.
2018 level vibes. And I think some people outside the industry won't really appreciate and understand the impact of that because they look for the big news, don't they? Well, it's not legal yet, is
Yeah.
it? They look for like the mega headlines, but these are huge steps forward for
The
the industry.
the lawyers and consultants and business operators in the sector have been pushing for changes in the listing rules,
Yeah.
facilitating getting businesses on the London Stock Exchange, opening up that huge pool of capital that is the London markets, and finally it's happened. So it's the result of a huge amount of hard work, and that's why it'd be so nice to be at First Wednesdays, because there'll be a lot of people who've been doing an incredible amount of work on that. People like Nick Davis at Memory Crystal, and others who have been, relentlessly trying to get businesses listed for years and years, and now with great success. And then we've got Beckham piling in now on Celebrity
So
Watch.
over to Celebrity Watch. What's he doing? Is he
Yeah,
CBD?
yeah.
CBD
So
company.
that company's going to be. They're aiming to be the first listed CBD business on the LSE, and they've kept it quite hush hush, and then brought out this raft of quite powerful investors, including David Beckham. But just when you think that all the celebrities are already in it, and
Beckham
then they're
rocks
not.
up.
And we were saying that we need good British celebrities to back cannabis businesses. There's good CBD guys already. The rugby player George Cruz and
Yeah.
his 4-5 CBD, but obviously Beckham is about as big as names get, isn't
He
it?
needs to go into rec. It needs to be blaze it like Beckham.
Is that, have
That'd
you
be.
pitched him yet?
I'm going to craft the email up straight after this. Like,
Yeah?
David,
Good.
got a great idea. It'll secure the kid's future.
Well, I'll give it my stamp of endorsement for
Blaze
what
it
little
like
that matters.
Beckham. Yeah, well done, David. Welcome to the CBD space. The Jay-Z one seems to be going quite well. I've seen a lot of good news stories about that and like quite positive vibes around the Jay-Z company that they kicked off. That's
Yeah.
quite big.
And let's see if these businesses all start, the American ones are going to start turning their attention global if everything gets sorted out to some degree at the federal level, then they
Yeah,
can start being proper global players.
yeah, defo. There's one a bit more of a policy wonky one. CBD has been listed as a cosmetic ingredient in the EU, so the European Union market regulator for trade in the EU has updated its guidelines to add plant-derived CBD as a legal ingredient in its cosmetics. The change comes after the recent ruling that CBD should not be classified as a drug and can be freely traded. How significant is that?
It's quite significant. It was to be expected after the European Court of Justice ruled that CBD, plant-derived CBD from the flower, is not a narcotic, which is contrary to what a lot of different countries around the world have decided.
Yeah.
But that led the whole EU to change its stance. And previously, for cosmetics, technically, you needed your CBD either to derive from the leaves and fibre of the plant or to be synthetic. But the reality was that there are already a lot of cosmetics being sold in the European Union which have plant-derived CBD from the flower of the plants. But this, makes it a lot simpler. This is going to make it much more interesting for the large FMCG businesses. It's going to start making it a lot clearer how, people like L'Oreal and Nestle and Unilever and others operate.
If
Much
the
more CBD in your supermarket. Much
CBD
more
in
of
your
that.
supermarket, you having a bit of drilling, by the way, Joe? Is that the driller attacking?
Yeah, I'm sorry
It's all right.
if any
But
of this noise makes it onto the
it's locked.
podcast.
It's
I'm
locked down right.
attempting to do up my house, and I've got someone sanding my front door as we speak.
Barry
That's not
homeowner
a
lives
euphemism.
lives
That's
on.
just,
You are actually Barry homeowner, and I love it.
I am.
Yeah, yeah. I've got
I
a guest
am.
in right now. Standing the door.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
kitchen island.
Dusty pink doors.
I was talking about the other week, wasn't I, about how politicians need to wake up to the fact that loads of industry groups are ready for cannabis legalization, and I guess you were kind of seeing that. You referenced it there, like there's so many big industries and companies, cosmetic companies, everything else that are like getting ready for cannabis reform and building it into their business plans and their products.
Yeah. I don't think it made our list this week or last, but there's that new. I think we've been doing too much US stuff, but there's that that new group for lobbying in Washington in the
Yeah,
US where they've brought together. It's basically a trade, like a trade association, bringing together a lot of the different groups to have a kind of unified voice in Capitol Hill, and that is a big moment. And I saw some negative comments from some of the public health crowd about this is going to turn into big tobacco, big alcohol, whatever, which is something to be aware of and make sure they don't end up having hugely disproportionate power. The way I feel in the moment is there's no way that cannabis is going to end up having hugely disproportionate lobbying influence. It's still a tiny industry, even though it's such a fast growing industry.
yeah,
It's just not going to have the kind of clout to really warp the market.
yeah.
And
What I find interesting is I've got it on the list a bit further down, but the U.S. Cannabis Council thing, like I found interesting that they got like advocacy groups in there and social justice groups. I think that's what makes it wholly different as a lobby from other areas. Like, is
well,
that how
I
it's totally different from the alcohol and tobacco lobby? When are they talking about
Yeah,
social
but then
justice?
weirdly, I think a lot of people were slagging it off because they had those in, and they
And
were
you
like,
can't
"Oh,
link.
this is just it's exactly because they're saying, oh, this is just a veneer of interest in actual rights and consumers and advocacy groups." But also, what would you rather the trade association just didn't
Yeah,
include any of those voices? And there has to be a trade association. You need the industry to have a voice when there's legislation that's going to define this
yeah,
industry for the next 5-10 years that's going to be going through in the US over the next 4 years. Like they need a joined up voice, and it should include representation from NGOs, but also it's not 100% about those NGOs, so it can't just be those groups.
yeah,
Like they're not. Yeah, well, we're in agreement, so it makes it a bit difficult to
yeah. Well,
debate.
I'll disagree with you if you want. I'll play the role of a really annoying public health person.
I think you'd be
It's
good at
literally
that,
like the
Paul.
least character I'd ever want to play. He's like a really public healthy. What about this? Sapping the fun out of everything, everywhere I go, removing fun and adding
I
labels.
don't know. I reckon you'd be pretty good at that,
Oh,
Paul. You've
thanks,
got some.
thanks a lot, George.
Yeah, I've seen you do it before.
What did someone describe me as once on Twitter when they trolled me? A copper at a rave.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You do have a copper at a rave vibe
Oh man, that made
sometimes.
us laugh so much. I remember when they said that. It looks like a copper at a rave. I was like, okay. Never been to a rave with me, but whatever. No, we do agree on that, don't we? I think it's good. It's good to have an advocacy voice in there, and I don't know, people just like to give industries a hard time to big up their own ideology, don't they? Ideology warriors. Let's get all the USA stuff out the way, because there's a little bit more. You mentioned there's like a raft of US reforms being proposed. To go into details a little bit, so Virginia is saying they're going to legalise recreational cannabis. That'll be the 16th state to legalise and create a recreational cannabis market. House lawmakers passed the bill by 55 to 42, while the Senate approved its version by 23 to 15. The recreational market will launch at the start of 2024, but simple possession could be legalised as soon as the summer. The bill holds an emphasis on licensing opportunities for small and minority-owned local businesses. That's good.
It is good.
See what I mean? This is what does my head in about the like terrible industry. So terrible. Industry can be terrible, of course it can, and there are like really bad examples of places, I mean, all over the place. But like, come on.
And the industry in the US and elsewhere hasn't been very inclusive or diverse,
but cowboyish sometimes.
Yeah, but that's also to do with things that aren't really. That are bigger, wider systemic problems. Like you have to have had money to set up a cannabis business in the US because it's very difficult to get any money from banks or institutions because of the legality and reputational risks associated with cannabis businesses. So the money came from people who already had money. So you're going to see, that being, predominantly white men because that's the way our society is structured at the moment. It's not something that's wrong with cannabis. I think actually cannabis is trying to be better, and there is substantial progress in trying to make the industry, play a role in undoing some of the harms of the war on drugs. And that's partly why it's been slow getting the legalization to happen in New York, because there is a lot of strong voices clamoring for that, and they need to draft it in the right way to make the industry as progressive as it can be. But that people are trying hard, and it's happening. So there is some really positive stuff going on as well.
And I guess the other thing that's encouraging alongside Virginia is Wisconsin. Sometimes I struggle to say that word. Proposing full cannabis legalization. So their governor has proposed a full cannabis legalization in their budget. Their 21-23 budget comes almost 2 years after Republican legislators shot down their previous plan to legalize medical cannabis. Proposed legislation would increase revenue, create jobs, reduce criminal justice system costs, and provide a pathway for people suffering from conditions that cannabis and medicine would benefit. Again, from a social justice advocacy perspective, sounds pretty good. Doesn't sound anything like alcohol and tobacco lobby. And then the last, I guess this is pretty big, high-level news in the US, but the first Senate leaders meeting was held to formally craft the federal cannabis legalization bill. So key US Senate leaders Schumer, Brooker and Wyden had their first meeting to formally step forward in crafting a bill to federally legalise cannabis. The trio is preparing to unveil a draft legislation in the early part of this year. Discussions from advocacy groups have been involved, NORML, the Drug Policy Alliance, the Students for Sensible Drug Policy, who I love SSDP. I did an event with them last night. They're brilliant. If anyone's watching this and a student and interested in harm reduction and drug policy, Google Students for Sensible Drug Policy. A key commitment is that the bill will be a minimum deschedule cannabis and seek to regulate it with a justice, equity-focused approach. Another theme, there's a theme, isn't there, of social equity and advocacy in these discussions.
That's a big part of why there's so much support for this industry, and I hope it does manage to, be good on some of the expectations. The reality is that the legalization of cannabis cannot unwind and make good all of the harm that has been done over, a century of prohibition. That is not within the capabilities of an industry. The more that can be done, the better, and there is a lot that can be done, but it's not going to row back all that stuff. But we can at least say, right, all the mistakes of the past are the past. Let's stop doing that and let's do it the right way going forward, and that'll undo some of the harm that's been done, but it'll never ever come close to undoing.
There's just so much of it, isn't there? Harm-wise, it's just such a significant amount of harm. Like, there's so much of it. The undoing of that is like colossal. Criminalisation, persecution, like it's just horrendous damage that's inflicted.
But I think some people are too willing to, be very conscious of fears around cannabis turning into the big tobacco or big alcohol industries, and then you get people who would otherwise be supportive of cannabis reform, being quite, speaking quite badly about a lot of the reforms and the trade it groups and all of this stuff. And it's just playing into the anti-cannabis brigade, because the likes of Kevin Sabet at Sam, they're just constantly banging the drum of saying this is just rich people getting richer, selling drugs, this is it, that's all that's happening, this is just tobacco and alcohol all over again, why would we do that again? And so, it's this balance of trying to make sure the reforms are as progressive as possible, but you don't just want to be playing into the narrative of the anti-brigade.
No, I don't think they realise they're doing it. It just strengthens their argument. I was talking to Catchy about this before earlier today. Is it like it's just fear-based arguments, isn't it? It's just stoking fear in people, and that the public health lobby against cannabis reform is basically uses the gambling narrative, tobacco narrative, alcohol narrative, doesn't it? To kind of stoke fear up in people, and it's not a helpful thing, is it? It's not a helpful way of looking at it. And I think, like, as someone that runs an advocacy organisation, that, like, the closer you are to the industry, the better, because the more influence you can have. Like, to point fingers and criticise the industry and be negative about it, go, oh, it's alcohol, tobacco lobby, like, you're just pushing yourself further and further away from a position where you can actually make a difference. Like, you want to be in the room. It's not about your ego, is it? But it becomes about people's ego and their principles and their ideology and how many likes they get on Twitter and how many retweets they get from people going, oh, it's brilliant, I agree with everything you say, I love your book, rather than like, well, how do you actually have an impact? Because everyone likes being popular. That's great fun. But not everybody likes being effective, because it means you're not very popular. The people that are effective often people that are a big fan of, are they?
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry, we'll park that rant.
Cannabis reform, not a popularity contest.
It's not a popularity contest.
Although you do have to understand how popularity contests work, because it does boil down to a popularity contest if it goes to a referendum or a poll or whatever.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't. Anything but a referendum, please.
Not more of them.
Last couple of stories. Is this ridiculous, George, or not? A report estimates the global cannabis market to reach 90.4 billion by 2026. It was published by Markets and Markets, the global cannabis market size. Oh, sorry, Markets and Markets is the name, and the report is the global cannabis market size. Is that ridiculous? Are these numbers always just fly around and?
Yeah, well, it's just it's a guess, isn't it? Well, we do some market forecasting and sizing for our clients, and the more useful bit of it is the methodology and looking through how you're actually trying to work it out. And I haven't been through their methodology.
We asked a few lads, and we decided the bit that they.
But that's not. It's not. That doesn't. Those numbers don't seem mad to me.
The bit that I can relate to is that Europe is the fastest. The European region is the fastest growing in the cannabis market. That seems.
It's still though. If you're growing from nothing, you're going to be fast growing for a long time before you're massive.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
That's the reality.
Last story, and you'll be asking yourself, how has this ever happened? But Jamaica's run out of cannabis. Apparently, there's a cannabis shortage in Jamaica. The result of hurricanes and droughts is a shortage of cannabis. And moreover, consumption has increased due to recent changes in its legal status and the pandemic. So the droughts and hurricanes have had an impact, and then more people have been smoking it. And the chief opportunity explorer, Tristan Thompson, said it's a cultural embarrassment. So Jamaica needs to get growing, George.
Here. I feel sorry for them. This is real. Life has a habit of kicking you when you're down. You just had a pandemic and a hurricane, and the one thing you just giving you a bit of a crutch through the thing is a nice daily sniff, and then it's gone. And then on an island, carpeted in ganja.
But like, at least we've got the weed. We're in a pandemic and the hurricanes are bad, but at least we've got the cannabis.
Yeah.
Let's get growing.
Well, it sucks to be in Jamaica. Although does it? I think it's probably a nice place to be right.
Yeah.
I've still got ice and snow coming at me from every angle.
Yeah.
I'd probably take the risk that I wouldn't have any ganja in Jamaica and be over there.
Maybe not so bad. That's the news. They're the stories. That's all we got, George. Another big week.
It is another big
in
week,
the
isn't
world.
it?
Oh, next week, I don't think it's going to be our faces. I think Katia and Lily are doing it. Maybe has been suggested. Or maybe it won't be one of our faces. Or maybe there'll be three of it. Who knows? Expect
New
all new
faces.
faces coming next week. Or maybe it'll be a spin-off show. All better points. Like a rival, an internal rival show. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
Take care.